All right. Looks like we've already got a handful of people on. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I mean, some of you guys have been chatting for a little bit here. Not much, but a little bit. But hopefully you can hear and see me. Looks like everybody's starting to load up here. So that'll be good. We'll get started in a minute. Just trying to give the last few stragglers a second or so to get in here. And then I got to figure out how to set this thing up. Okay, James tells me hearing is good, video is good. Awesome. Troy says loud and clear. We're good. Jimmy's here. Great. All right. Welcome to No BS Woodworking Tuesday Tips. Tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about the shaper origin. And I know it's for a lot of people, it's a controversial subject. You know, they look at this and they go, oh, it's cheating. And because I hear it all the time. But, you know, the other thing that I get all the time when I go somewhere is that thing really worth it? You know, what kind of stuff can you do to it? And is it really that accurate? And that's kind of what I want to go over a little bit tonight. I'm going to show you a couple of really basic things to set this up and kind of use it, kind of like an intro sort of a thing to it. So I've got a little bit of mahogany here that I'm going to show you how I can very accurately lay out certain operations on the machine, on the fly. As I'm going through this, you're going to see it in real time. And then I've got something a little special over here that I had actually demonstrated this year at Fine Woodworking in New England. And I'm going to try and cut out a little brass hinge in the process here. Hopefully I can get everything aligned pretty quickly so you guys aren't watching me sit here and fiddle with this thing. It's actually pretty easy. And that's really what I wanted to kind of cover with all of this, is how easy and intuitive this machine really is. It's not an inexpensive tool. I'm not saying, that it's for everybody. But one thing that it really brings to my woodworking, and I'm sure if you followed me for any length of time, you're aware that basically my entire career, I've been a period furniture maker. And the vast majority of stuff that I've made throughout my career has been more of a blended kind of woodworking, power tools and hand tools, and with a heavy bent towards the hand tool end of things. I would say I was probably 60-40 hand tools. And when I first heard about this thing, I thought, number one, how accurate can a handheld CNC router be? Number two, why? But I'm sure I've told this in the last time we did some stuff on here. I had a student who brought one to class, and we were cutting out some backsplats for some chairs with it. And the fact that it is so accurate and so repeatable makes it a tremendous addition to just about any shop, if you've got the budget to support it, which is, a lot of people don't. So there's nothing wrong with that. And that's really what I think it brings to, if you watch the previous one, which was months ago, I talked about how I made that arched jig for cutting the drawer fronts on a jewelry box. And what sort of got me going on this last week was I was cutting out hinges, and it's a lot of fun. And once I got the design and stuff, it was brought into the machine using the trace, which I don't have out here. That's a whole different evening would be to set up a trace and show you how it works. But we've also used it in a lot of other classes. And like I said, what it brings to me and my work is really just an ease of layout and a repeatability that I just can't get on certain in certain operations, and it's so much more accurate than I. So what I've got here, and this is why it's as I'm talking, it's not making much sense if you don't know what I'm talking about. So I have a piece of mahogany here that's laid out basically as a case side for a spice box that we were making in class earlier, a couple of months back. And I've got it milled to the right size for the case side, and once I bring the close-up camera over, I'll show you again. But I laid out off of my drawing the placement for all the horizontal dividers on the spice box. And what I want to do is on the machine lay out all of the 1/4-inch grooves for the dividers, and there's 1/2-inch groove at the top for a false top. So although I might make it 3/8 because that'll give me a little bit more space up there in that secret compartment. So the idea is this part of tonight's show is about the basics. I'm going to show you how I scan. I've got a plywood board here that I laid out tape on. I've used it for a multitude of projects at this point. And to me, that's the best way to do this. If you're unfamiliar with the Shaper Origin, it comes with a roll of this domino style tape here. It's a non-repeating pattern. And the whole idea is you lay this out. You can lay it out on the piece that you're cutting and cut through the tape. You can lay it out on an adjacent board. They make a workstation which has the domino pattern set into like Formica or some kind of Formica-like substance. It's a plastic laminate so that you're not wearing out the tape, and you can set your workpiece up against the edge of that workstation and lay out just about anything you want. And having the tape offset from what you're actually cutting, to me makes a lot of sense because the tape lasts a lot longer. When I get the close-up camera here, I'll show you how you'll see this section of tape closest to me. Part of it's pretty well worn from cutting out hinges last week because the base of the shaper was working its way across the tape and wearing it out. So what happens is the minute the tape gets some scratches across the dominoes, it no longer reads those dominoes. And what the tape does is it functions like a GPS, and you start by scanning it. And what that does is that creates a workspace inside of the computer on the shaper. And it knows what position it is in space based off of that scan. So essentially the tape becomes the roadmap to whatever you're going to cut. You don't have to lay the tape out in any specific fashion. It doesn't have to be an equally divided spacing on the tape. You can put tape at an angle. It doesn't really much matter. It's the idea that it scans that space, creates basically a 2D workspace inside the machine itself, and it knows where it is in that space at all times. So yes, it's a CNC machine, but it's really it's really more dedicated to 2D stuff than it is 3D stuff. You're not going to carve, I think I said this before, you're not going to carve a bone cloth foot with it. Although they did just come out with a gantry system for this thing that allows it to move. So I would imagine that it's going to start doing more 3-axis stuff, 3D stuff rather than just X and Y axis stuff. You're going to get more, but the thing has it has limited travel. I mean, the maximum travel on this thing is about 1.5 inches, 1.75 inches. So you're not going to carve anything. You're not going to set this up and walk away and come back to the statue of David. It's not that kind of a thing. And I think that's why a lot of people think that CNC of any kind is cheating, because you're not actually doing the work. Well, the thing that I really like about this is I've got a lot of control over it. And just like with all of my other hand and power tools, the more I understand them and how they function with the materials that I'm working with, I can get creative and do things that a lot of other people don't do because they don't think in the same manner as I do, which is probably lucky for them. So like I said, when I did the curved jig for the bandsaw and made it using this machine, that's not something that I see a lot of people out there doing, that kind of stuff. I mean, there's a handful of people. If you search around the internet, you'll find them. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to move this back, and I'm going to bring over the close-up camera, and then I'll switch, because that way nobody's getting seasick as I'm sliding things around. So you're going to see the camera come on screen a little bit, but once again, hey, it's a free presentation. The other thing I wanted to do was try and get it in here so that I could not have any reflection on the screen. Oops. So that when I start to do things with it, you will see what I'm doing instead of the reflection of the lights. I'm going to move this down a little. I'm going to back up a little bit more so I can show you what's going on. All right, that looks good. Now all I got to do is get around here without knocking all my tools off and switch our camera. All right, that one. Bingo. All right. All right, so, oh, excellent. We got a lot of people here tonight. We're doing pretty good. I'm happy. All right. So what you can see on camera is the machine itself and the screen. I'm going to turn my monitor around on the camera so that I can actually see what I'm pointing at. I'm not sure it shows up perfectly on camera or not, but off to that side, this area of the tape is fairly chewed up and worn from the stuff that I was doing last week. But, I've got the tape laid out. I'm going to move the machine off to the side. And what you should see now, besides all the little bits of brass dust from cutting the stuff out there, I'll tilt this down just a tiny bit, is I've got a mahogany case side for my spice box. And again, what I did was I went to my drawing or my layout stick, I laid it on here and marked the position of the bottom of each of the horizontal dividers. So I know that the groove or the dado that I'm going to cut has to be to the right of each of these lines. So what I need to do first, and hopefully we can get a lot of this on camera, is I'm going to move the machine back here. I'm going to try and back the camera up just a tiny bit. See if we can't. Going to check my other monitor. Yep, not a ton of reflection, just enough to make it annoying. So I'm in scan mode. When I look at the screen here, there's a lot of things, a lot of different commands that I have from this home screen. I mean, there's a settings, scan, design, and cut on the right side, new scan, add to scan, and I can actually access old workspaces. So right now I'm on workspace number 53. I could go in there and edit that and call it anything I want. So I'm going to start by doing a new scan. All right, so we're going to start the scan by pressing on the green button, and then you'll see I'm going to rotate the cameras out here in front. You can see every time I put my fingers in front of the camera, it can no longer see the tape. And now it flashes, hey, no tape found, find me some tape. But when I do that, you see how I get all of these segmented photos that are kind of showing up in the screen. That's what's going to happen as I move the camera around. And I'm going to actually pull it back, and I'm going to scan the entire surface of my spice box side. And that's actually one of the things that that's kind of a tip that I found out over time from when I first started using this, because I was just scanning only the taped area. And what I found is it's easier to do the layout for this stuff and the placement of the things that you want to cut if you actually scan the board you want to cut. So let's start the scan. So I've got a new scan, and you can see the tape is black and all the stuff that's blue on the screen. But if I come in a little bit more on the screen, although it's going to move around here, so it's going to be kind of weird because I have to rotate this and slide it so that I'm turning all of the tape that is not scratched blue from black. And you can see this whole section here where I said I was wearing it from last week. Oops. So I'm trying to keep it in plane. So I've just scanned everything. I moved the machine and hung it out here in space off the end of the bench, tried to keep it in plane with this surface, and made sure that I scanned my whole piece of mahogany as well. Okay, so now what you're seeing on camera, which I will bring it in a little closer now so that we're not trying to do this from a distance. Okay, you're actually seeing the surface of this mahogany. It's not a live shot because the camera is pointing out in front of the machine. What you're seeing is what's directly underneath the center of this router motor. It goes straight down through the bit, and that's the wood that I'm seeing directly underneath. Okay, so if I back out far enough, now you can see here's the edge of my board, the bottom edge of my board, the end of my board. And then if I come in a little closer, hopefully I'm not flashing. So these lines are those lines that I drew on my case side when I used the drawing to transfer the positions of these things. So what I need to do now is create a grid all over the whole surface so that I can accurately design and place. Back up. So if I come down here, I've got these marks on here, and their sole purpose for me today was to give me a visual aid as to whether or not I'm placing the dados in the proper place. As long as I'm pretty close, I'm going to be happy. But I need to make sure that I have to form a grid on the computer that will map out my X and Y axis and tell me where the 0 point is, which is way off camera there. So X axis, Y axis, 0 is what I'm going to shoot for here. So I'm going to show you how I do that. Let's widen this up just a tiny bit. This is a tougher. So if I go into, if I tap the screen for grid, which is on the left side there, right? And I'll put a new grid on there. It's going to tell me that I have to lower the bit down to the point where it extends beyond the surface of my mahogany board. So to do that, what I have is the engraving bit turned upside down, and I'll show you here in a minute, right? So I've set my depth, tap set your depth, and what I want to do is bring it up until it touches the case side of my spice box. Number 1 is done. It wants a second point to create the line, and then so that's my x-axis, and if I bring it around to the side and bring it till the bit taps the end of my board, hit the green button again, and then I'll bring you guys back in tight on my screen. What you should be able to see, and if you look down here, you can see a set of squares with all out of dashed lines. You can see it easier up than you can up top. And right now it's set for a 1/2 inch square grid. So if I hit my grid thing and I say modify, it's set for a 1/2 inch. So all I need to do is change it to whatever I want. And I like to do a 1/16 inch, 0.0625. It'll round it up to 0.063. No, something, I didn't hit it right. Modify, 625. Yeah, there we go. Why is this still showing up as a 1/2 inch grid? Done. Okay, let's start over. Grid. New. 2 seconds. 2 more seconds. 1, 2, 3. Grid. Modify. 0.0625. Done. I must have had in 625, which is 5/8. So now if you're looking, I'm trying to get this so that I'm not getting all my lights in the screen. Down here, that grid is really tiny. Oh, the camera graphics are on. Sorry, fella. Oh, I had all of that off last week too. We had this problem last time. Was things are changing on my tools. A little better. Sorry about that. Okay, so now you should be able to see, particularly down here where there's nothing scanned, that my grid is actually really tiny. You're going to see a ton of just little dots. If I don't think I can zoom in close enough that you guys can really, maybe you can see the grid, but it's all over the piece of mahogany as well, right? Yeah, you can see it across the bottom fairly well, I would think. So what I want to do now is start in my design. And what I want to do, I'm going to back up just slightly so that you can see what I'm doing, is I want to create the first dado. So what I want to do is make a rectangle. And my width is 0.25. And my height is going to be how far in here I want this thing to go. And I want it to go about 7 1/4. Whoops. 7. Let's try that again. 7.25. Done. Okay. So now if I zoom in a little bit, you can see I've got a rectangle that's there. And what I need to do is figure out where and how to place it on my first line. So I've got a couple of options. I'm going to back my camera up so that I'm not whacking it with the machine. So I could I could zoom in a little on the screen so you can actually see what I'm talking about instead of guessing. So if you remember, I've got those lines drawn on there. So theoretically, I could bring it over and line it up with the line and bring it down right to 0 on my x-axis, right? So that's one way of placing this. The other thing I could do is I could hit the position button. Sorry, you're getting reflection. So I'll go, right, create. Sorry, I just backed out of it. 0.25, 7.25, done. Zoom in. So like I said, I can drag it. I can change so my anchor point, what I'm dragging it with, I have set to that lower left corner. I could set it pretty much anywhere on the dado that I just created, but that's the one I really want, is that lower left corner. So like I said, I can bring it over, line it up on that line that I drew on the surface, and bring it down until it touches my x-axis. So now what you're seeing is here on the Y, it's at 0, right? So the other thing I could do is I have a distance. I know what this measurement is from the, well, widen the camera up. They can't see you pointing if you're off camera. So I know what the distance is from the end of my board to my first line. And that distance is 4 5/8. So if I bring it over and we try this again, all right, zoom in a little. I know you guys are getting all the directions. So now I can hit the position button. And what I can say is I want my X to be 0. And I want my Y 4.625. Done. Nope, wrong. I have it backwards. Sorry. 4.625. 0. Done. Okay. Now when I zoom in, it's falling right on top of my line that I drew. So now I can hit the place button, or I can tap the place button on the screen, and it's placed that dado right where I want it on the case side. Now all I have to do is tap copy, drag it over, and it's going to come over again. Well, I know what my second dado is, so I can now go to position, and so my X will be 0. No, 4. Wait, back up. 4. I'm going to do it again. It's been a long day, folks. And 0 on the Y. Sorry, 0. There we go. Done. Okay. So good. I just put it in the same position. 7 7/8, not 4. 7.875. Done. Now I just moved it over. Okay, well, you can see I'm a little punchy this evening, so it was a long weekend. I was up in Connecticut teaching. Okay, so I can continue to do that. I can then, I've locked it in, place it, and now what I can do is copy that, slide it over, do the next one, which is 10 7/8. So position, keep sliding the camera over so you guys can see. Now there we go. I'm trying to get it so everything's reflective on this tonight, so it's hard. So what did I say that was? 10 7/8. 0.875. You can also do fractions on this, and you can change it from inches to millimeters, whatever you want there. 13 5/8 would be my next one. Place that, copy, position. So 13.625. and 0 done, place that one. And now I want to do my final one, which is I'm going to do a 3/8 inch. So instead of just copying the 1/4 inch one and then trying to figure out how to modify it, what I'm trying to do at this point is not get my lights reflecting in the screen there. So I'll just go into create a new rectangle. My width is 0.375, or wait a minute, let's do it fractionally. 3/8, done. And my height is going to be 7.25. Done. Okay, so now I've got a 3/8 inch dado that is exactly the same as the other one. And what I need to do is position it. So here would be 16, and this would be 0. 0. Done. Okay. So when I start to look at these things, place that. Now you can see they're falling pretty much right on those lines that I drew on the case side. So to me, that's the easiest thing to do is get all this stuff placed. And now this becomes boy, I'm losing my mind here. It's becoming a workspace of its own. Okay, so at this point, if I wanted to, I'm going to try and widen this up enough and move far enough back that you can see what's going on here. So I've got all the dados laid out here. If I was running a class and we were going to make 4 or 5 of these, what I could do is set a stop block up here. And now everybody just drops their case side in, and it's going to route all of those dados in exactly those same spots. And this is only the one side. This is the left side of my case. So really what I can do is I can take and create another workspace by scanning again. And what I could do is take everything that I've done and flip it over on the machine, and then make the mirror image of this side. Okay, so I also told you I was going to show you what was going on here with the probe. So I'm going to unplug it. I will remove. So what I've got is that's the shank of the bit that they give you for engraving. So what I did, and I'll loosen this up, this is a Festool trim router motor, so it's pretty good. Okay, so let's get rid of the stuff so we can get a little more contrast. So it's an engraving bit. It's about a 60-degree bevel on the bit, 1/4 inch shank, and I just put it in cutting edge first into the motor, and the whole idea here was to lower it down until the shank was tapping against the sides of my piece when I made my grid, right? So I'm done with that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put in the spiral upcut bit one of the bits that they give you with the machine. This is the 1/8 inch bit, because I can create a 1/4 inch dado with an 1/8 inch bit, or I could modify it and make it slightly small so that when I mill my 1/4 inch material, it allows for a little bit of room to either scrape, plane, or sand that material. So I've locked that in, drop this back in here, plug it in and lock the motor into place. And now I'm ready to cut my dados. And I'm not going to cut them all because that'd be just annoying to watch, let alone film. It comes with this guard system. I have the vacuum hooked up to it, and I've got the machine plugged into the vacuum so that when I turn the motor on, the vacuum will automatically turn on and off. These guys are owned by Festool, so the dust collection is actually fairly good on it. So let's just cut one, have some fun here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is come back over. I'm trying to do this so that you can see everything that's going on. Right. Except for when I take the camera in too far and then you can't see squat. All right. So I'm on design still. So if I go to cut, okay, the thing that I have to tell it is that I've got the bit size is the 1/8 inch bit, which is done, right? But it doesn't know where the top of my mahogany surface is. So what I'm going to do is something called the Z touch. And I will back up again for this. Boy, this is like really annoying to me tonight that I've got to do so much extra camera work. That's why next week's not going to, yeah, well, we'll see. All right. So if I hit automatic, you can see the motor goes down till the bit just touches the surface of my case side. And now it knows where the top of that surface is. So I can tell it how deep I want to cut, and it will know. Like a thermos, keeps hot things hot and cold things cold. How does it know? Because I just did the Z touch. That's how come. So I told it where the top of the board is. And now I want to tell it how deep to cut. And what you're seeing here is right now I've got it set for, I can tell it to cut inside those lines. I could tell it to cut outside the lines. I can tell it to cut on the line, which centers the bit on my 1/4 inch mark there. Okay. I can also tell it to pocket cut, which is going to cut everything out in between the two lines that make up the left and right sides of my dado, except that it's going to keep it a few thou off of those lines so that I can then go back and do an inside cut and make it absolutely flawless, whatever size I want. Okay. And then there's a guide. I can either put the guide on or put the guide. I just turned it off, so I'll turn it back on because it's maybe. Yeah. All right. We're going to go back to the inside. Okay. So what you can see when I'm doing this is I've got little marching ants there that are telling me which way I have to go. So on the left side here of that dado, I have to be moving towards the top of the screen. And it's going to go up and turn around and come back down. The other thing I can do is I can tell it I want an offset. So to start out a little small isn't a bad thing. So if I turn around and I say I want a 5/1000 offset, now it's going to make that groove about 5/1000, the dado about 5/1000 small. So a little bit more than a sheet of paper. Okay. So, I mean, I can modify that to anything I want. You know, there's 10/1000, 50/1000, anything, and you can type in any number you want. So I'm going to leave it at the 5/1000 for now, and my depth of cut is controlled by the part, the button up top on the left. Long day. All right. So the first thing I can do, so they have a thing here called air cut. So if I go air cut, what that's going to do is it's going to lower the motor so that it is about 5/1000 above the surface of my board. And that allows me to remove the guard. I can tap the green button. It'll lower the motor down just above the surface of my case side. And I can run a practice run to make sure that everything is kind of lining up with the lines that I drew. So, but, this is live woodworking. How many times do you guys run through a practice thing before you actually do the real thing? And, I'm pretty sure that the answer to that is never, because I've seen you guys here in classes and you cut things when you should have measured, measure once, cut twice, curse 3 times, right? So I'm going to go to, let's go 0.0625. and I don't want it above the surface. We're going to say, I'm going to make my depth of cut a 1/16. Pretty easy stuff. I'm going to turn the machine on. This machine is pretty heavy. The reason that the marching ants go up and around there is it's telling me to go up on the left side of my cut, because that way I'm not climb cutting. So if I turn the machine on, so the reason I came in and I turned it off because I don't want to talk over the vacuum here. Although I'm mic'd and it's not, so you probably hear me better anyway. You can see where the screen turned blue. So I've already made a cut up that left side. The whole idea here is I want to keep those marching ants inside that circle. So I have about a 1-inch window. The motor on this thing is on a gimbal. And if I start to move left and right, I'm going to try and get the motor into the shot here. If I start to move left and right, let's do the air cut. So I'm up above the surface. Oops, I went too far. Sorry. So what I was showing you there is when this went down, I could move the machine back and forth, but from your vantage point, the motor never moved, but the computer screen shifted left and right. Okay. And that's how this thing functions, is the gimbal on here has a 1-inch window, a 1-inch diameter window that it will automatically adjust based on where I am relative to those marching ants on the screen. So as I do this, I'll turn it on and I'll continue my 1/16 inch deep cut. To slide too far off of the thing. The farther over I go, you can see a little arrow show up, and the brighter it gets, the more at risk I am of being off of my line. And if I go too far, I'm answering Bob's question before I even saw it. Yeah, so you saw as I moved off to that side, that arrow got brighter. If I move too far, what's going to happen is it's going to, I'm going to get outside that circle with my marching ants, and it can no longer adjust to stay on the line. So what happens is it aborts. So if I were to, let's reset my depth to 0.062. No, not 0.625, and it's not negative. Done. I'll make that cut again now. And I'm going to move it so that it's off the line and it aborts. So you can hear the router cutting. And if I move over, my arrow just showed up. The more I go, the brighter it gets until it finally backs out. But if I turn down here so that you can actually see the surface, maybe if I, okay, my dado is still flawless. Okay, even though I was coming up there and I traveled off that way, it aborted. So it's still cutting right on my line, which is not something that would happen. So normally in a class, if I were making this for myself or a customer, the way that I've done it for the last 40 years is we would set up a fence and run a router up against the fence to cut along the lines that we transferred from our drawing or our layout stick. And invariably, some of these things are cut above the line or below the line. If the fence loosens up and it slides, now you've got a cut going off into space in your case side, and that's not the case with the shaper origin. It's always going to cut exactly where I have this. The thing you got to really worry about is the case side breaking loose. And you could clamp this down to the bench. I've just got everything double-faced tape down for the moment because I knew I wasn't going to do a ton of heavy routing this evening. We're just trying to give you guys an idea of what's going on here. So to me, that's the plus side of this tool. All I'm using, I'm not doing anything different than I would with a regular router and a bit or a hand tool. You know, if I was doing this with a dado plane, I'd have a fence set up and I'd be running in there, you know, to plow the dado in there. But if the fence slides, I get a dado at an angle. If I'm doing it with a router and the fence slides, I get a dado at an angle. As long as my case side remains attached to my work surface and it stays in the same position relative to my tape board, this is always going to come out the same. So from a screw up standpoint, or from a standpoint of wasting less time, less material, and not having as much frustration in my life, I can route 100 of these case sides and they will all be exactly the same. And I won't have any slip ups. And the width of this dado is going to be the same. So let me finish up this dado real quick. And then at that point, I want to show you how I do the stuff with the brass. So on we go. All right. So the really cool thing was, and I don't know if you guys really kind of recognized it or not, but I went onto that left side of that dado 3 or 4 times just in this little segment because I kept ejecting this thing. I even changed the depth of cut after I had made my first cut into about here, ejected it. I changed it to an air cut where I was above the surface. And then I started over and I went back in and routed again, and nothing has changed on this thing in that process. Okay. This line is still dead straight. It's not like if I did that with a plunge router and a fence, I don't think I could keep that accurate over that length. Okay. I think at some point I would have drifted either this way with my router having to do this multiple passes like that. But I can do this over and over again until I get down to the depth that I want, which is about 1/4 of an inch. Okay. I could, for case size, that's where I'm headed. So that gets me through doing this. So I just keep changing the depth here. Actually, what I would do at this point, because I've got the depth set, is I would go do the next group, then change my depth and come back. I could do more than a 1/16 at a shot on this because it's just mahogany. It's not like I'm not routing through brass or something that's really hard. So the idea here is I can continue to make this deeper until I get down to my final depth. If I were to check this, I should be about 5 thousandths under a 1/4 inch, because, which I don't have my caliper around here. That would have been a good thing to have on camera. Problem is, with live woodworking, I didn't think of that until after I got done here, because I wasn't really going to do an offset, but I decided to on the fly. So if I were to measure that, which I guess I can grab a ruler. Probably won't see 5 thousandths on camera, but yeah, it's small by about the thickness of the line for the 1/4 inch mark there, you know. So it is slightly smaller than a 1/4. So, and the cool thing is I can modify that. So if I make my dividers and when I mill them, if they come up 3 thousandths over, I just put this right back into position up against my tape board, and I can drop the machine right back into the same dados, and I can do the offset at 3 thousandths over a 1/4 inch, and it would come up perfect. Okay, I could tweak these dados even after I removed it, as long as I get my position relative to the tape board the same, which is why when you guys look at the edge of my tape board, you're seeing I have a series of lines on here, because what I was doing in other projects is I would just transfer either the end of my board or a center line or something like that from my case side to the tape board, and this way I can line these things up repeatedly if we need to modify what we've done so far. So again, it's not doing anything that I wouldn't do with a router or a hand tool. I'm not having it carve my bone cloth feet. I'm not going to have it, do my dovetails. I mean, although I'm pretty sure it could probably do part of it anyway. But I am trying to eliminate the potential for the mistakes that just happen. Accidents happen in the shop. You get things that slide. So, Charles Wilson, wouldn't it be 5 thousandths on each side? It's possible. I thought it was only 5 thousandths on one side, but you might be right, Charles, now that I think about it. Again, well, you were there. It was a long weekend for me. So I'm going to remove my side. You can see I've just got a little bit of double face tape on there. And what I want to do is put down that brass piece, and I'll show you how I lay that out. I've already got that scan done. I just have to import it. So I've got to take the tape off, or take the backer off my tape here, flip it over, and get this stuff lined up. I'll bring in the pattern. So all I have to do is bring that. Yeah, you can't see it because it's not on camera, because I'm up in the air. There we go. So what I've got is a piece of 16th inch sheet brass. And what I did was I took a piece of plywood that was the same thickness as my my tape board, and I ran a rabbet in there until this came up flush, right? So all I have to do is put it right up against, press it down against my bench. Now everything's solid. So now we're going to bring the machine back to start. Now it's still reading that piece of mahogany with my, yeah. You guys actually want to see what I'm doing here? So it's still got the piece of mahogany with the dados for the spice box in there, right? So the big problem is this isn't the mahogany. It's not a spice box side. So I'm going to start with a new scan. Actually, I can probably bring in an old workspace. So if I go back to 44, I think it was 40, 44, workspace 44. Ta-da. Nope, it's not liking that because my tape is so screwed up. So I'm going to go back and do a new scan real quick. Start scan. I will do this fast. I'm not overly worried. Finish. Done. So workspace 56 is going to show me everything, including where my piece of brass is kind of cut out there from where I was cutting the old hardware. That curve that's going on there is actually a scratch in the surface of the brass. You can see it. Okay. So what I need to do is I need to bring the camera up so you can see what I'm doing. Make sure that I'm not reflecting all over the place. And I will answer, Kevin asked a question there, and I'll get to that in a second. Let me dump this on here and I'll show you a little bit. So I'm going to import another workspace. I'm going to bring over workspace 44, which was what I had used. So now it's not going to change the scan. All it's going to import is all of the stuff. So change my anchor over to that left side. So if I bring this a little more forward, so you guys can see I've got 3 of these little hinges laid out on here. And what I can do is I can drag that right over and place it right where I want on my brass. Again, I could theoretically have measured everything, put a new grid on here, and then placed it based on its position on the grid. But visually dragging it and dropping it works just as well too. Okay, so now what I've got is those pieces of brass that are stuck there. I have the brass, the piece of brass sheet is double face taped into that rabbet that I created onto the plywood. If I bring it over here so my design is highlighted now in green, right? You should be able to see that. I'm trying to get back far enough that you can see what's going on without reflection. So if I go to cut, well, first of all, if I go to cut, I have the 1/8 inch bit in there. I don't want any offset. I want to go outside the line. And I want a Z touch, which means this thing is going to drop down, test the top of my piece of brass. Now it knows where 0 is. And what I want to do is I want to change my cut to 0.0 0.07. How about that? We'll go 7 thousandths. Done. Okay. So now the dust collection is somewhat less efficient when I'm cutting brass, but the idea here is I'm going to follow those marching ants around the outside. So they're working from the top of my screen on the left side of the hinge. They're working down towards this point. I turn around and go up and then are back across the top. Okay, so pretty easy stuff. I'm only going to do this once, and then we'll talk a little bit and wrap this up for this evening because we're about an hour already. Hey, something went wild. Wait. So I did something wrong. Z-touch automatic. Let's get it down there on top of that brass again. All right. Now we'll try it again. I didn't quite make it all the way around, but somehow I missed part of it. But you'll. So kind of cool, huh? So I can cut out very simple flat hardware. I'm sure that given the fact that this thing has a standard setting to make box joints and things like that, I probably could design and cut out 2 leaves of a knuckled butt hinge. I would just have to have a way to drill or some way to roll the brass over to create the knuckles. So, I mean, I can cut this out. I can keep going. When I cut these out before, this is 1/16 inch thick brass, and I think I did it in 3 passes. And you'll notice that I didn't change my router bit. It's, number one, it's late and I don't want to go that long. But, I used the same carbide router bit that I was using to cut the dados in the mahogany, and it'll cut the brass. Don't do this with steel. You can do non-ferrous metals, so brass, aluminum, tin, things like that. Okay, so let's get this camera. Let's switch back over, and then I'll start talking about looking at some questions and doing a little discussion here and there. All right, so get this off the screen. Out of the way. So wasn't that fun? Actually, I think it is. I do think this is a lot of fun. I mean, this is to me, this is it's a fun little tool to play with. We've done a bunch of different things. So Kevin said something about he sees that it would be pretty limited on what he could do for 16th and 17th century British furniture. He said the only possibility he can come up with would be a pie crust tabletop. And I don't really see how I would go about a pie crust tabletop with this. I've been trying to play with it, but to me, it's too much 3D. This thing, so the reason I put the brass in here and I set it into a rabbet till it was flush, and I used some of the same Baltic birch for this to hold the brass as I did for my tape board, was because this thing really doesn't take too well to variations in plane. Everything really needs to be on the same plane. So if you're going to route out or dish out a pie crust table, you have to have some way to hold this in a single plane while it routes down. And then at that point, you're also trying to figure out how to make the scallops and those kinds of things. I mean, you could certainly do it, I'm sure. This does not have the computing power behind it yet that a real full-size gantry CNC machine has. You have a lot more control on something like that because you're creating the tool pass on a gantry CNC, whether it's a benchtop or a stationary one, something like that. Whereas this thing, you're bringing in a scalable vector file, SVG file, and you're telling it how big you want it to be and where you want it to be, and then it creates the tool pass based on the fact that it has a limited number of tools available to it. It's router bits with 1/4 inch shanks. And it's primarily V bits and straight bits that it's functioning with. So if you're trying to do things with round over bits or coving bits, you've got to kind of know where the 0 point is, how deep the cut is on those things, and how to tell the machine go this deep. And you're gonna have to think, okay, if I've got a quarter round bit on there, which part of it is actually functioning like a straight bit? And you might have to tell it you have a 3/8 inch bit instead of a quarter-inch bit in order to get it to line up where you want it to be. So, um, so my take really is, yeah, there's limits to what this can do for an 18th century furniture maker. Um, but some of those things, like I said, the spice box, to me, that's a really great example of it's not doing anything differently than I would do with my regular toolkit, except that it's eliminating or severely reducing the potential for catastrophic screw up. Or, eh, you know, I'm not going to come out with uh, case sides or my dividers in my spice box where one side of the drawer opening is a 16th or an eighth of an inch wider than the other because I didn't line up my fence the proper way and things like that. So to me, it, it's the kind of tool that I can use to supplement what I'm already doing. It brings a whole new level of accuracy and repeatability to it. Like I said, if I was doing those case sides, I could set a stop and bounce these things in there, and then if I could actually take everything that I laid out on that work surface for those dados and take it and then flip the whole thing upside down, and it would still reference off of the same stop. I just have to make sure everything's in the right position. So what else do we have there? Uh, Norman says it'll do mortises and tenons. It certainly will. Um, Jeff wanted to know, do you need a special? I'm assuming a special bit. And the answer was no, I just use a regular carbide bit. Once again, non-ferrous metals. So aluminum, brass, tin, those kinds of things. And you can cut those. I mean, I could take this over and cut it on my chop saw or my table saw. And, it does wear the carbide down a little quicker than the wood, but not noticeably. Okay, you don't need special metal cutting tools to work those tools, that material. And then Brian says maybe the new bench pilot would let you do the pie crust edge, but I think it would be limited. I think you're right. I think the problem is still, I have no doubt that at some point in the relatively near future, these guys are constantly updating the software on here, giving it new capabilities. When I turned it on tonight, there were two new extensions. One was for probing and mapping circular items. So I would imagine with that new gantry system, you're going to start to be able to do things on a slight curve that you have not been able to do to date because it's always running on the base of the router itself. So I think it's an inevitable. It's coming. It's just they're not everywhere they need to be yet. Jeff, is there any bit I'm not sure what you're asking there. I'm assuming is there any bits that I wouldn't use on brass? Most of the time, well, like I said, I cut some of these out at the Fine Woodworking Live thing back in May up in Connecticut. And I was just using the regular router bits. I could use a quarter-inch bit. The eighth-inch bit really, it's easier on the bit. It's easier on the metal, and I can stack them pretty close together. Whereas the quarter-inch bit means I'm losing another eighth or a quarter of an inch of material. So beyond that, nothing I would do. What about the grooves for string inlay? Norman wants to know. Yeah, well, so that was one of the things that really impressed me the most. I did a demi-lume card table class last year, and a woman by the name of Carol was in the class. She's actually been on some of the live streams on Tuesday nights here and there, and she designed an asymmetrical 1 millimeter string inlay that went around in the apron around the half circle curve. So the question is, I'm not really sure how I would have cut the groove on that asymmetrical wave without this tool. The way we did it was we made up the face veneer. We had all the brick laid work for the curved apron. Check out my Instagram. There's a stack of them shown on there. We cut them out and shaped them up. And then what we did was we made a 1/8 inch mahogany face veneer. And she had drawn the whole thing up in a CAD program. And she took that off the CAD program and took the semicircular drawing of that front apron and had the CAD program lay it out flat. So our veneer became 6.5 feet long. So it was a piece of veneer that we made 1/8 inch thick, 4 inches wide, and 6.5 feet long. And we imported that drawing into the machine. It's really easy to do. Because right now my machine is connected to the internet, and if I could load it on. The way we did it was it also comes with a little USB stick. So we stuck it into her laptop computer. After she flattened it, we loaded the file. She exported it as an SVG file onto the USB stick. I plugged it into the machine, and we just imported it right onto a new work surface. And what I had was a great big piece of plywood about 8 feet long with tape on it. Next to it, we had taken a matching piece of plywood, thinned it down 1/8 of an inch through the planer, and then tacked her veneer to it, kind of similar to what I'm doing here with the brass, so that it was all in the same plane. We imported the design, and we air cut it with a 1 millimeter bit, and then we went down 3/1000ths to make sure that it was still positioned where she wanted on the veneer. And then I went back again and again and again. I mean, it must have been 4 or 5 tries to get to the depth that we wanted, which was about 3/32. We did not want to pierce the veneer and make it into 2 parts. We wanted to set it up so that we could take some of the 1 millimeter stringing that we made and set it in there and have it go down in, and that way she could scrape and sand it flush without either sanding through the veneer or the inlay. And the reality is, over a 6.5 foot stretch, going back into that 1 millimeter groove 4 or 5 times, the groove never got any wider. It just got deeper. So every time we did it, I went down a few thousandths at a time, and we would put the string inlay in there to make sure that it was still fitting. And it was like, okay, a little deeper, because it's still sticking up too far above the surface to level down. So it's awesome for that kind of stuff. In fact, I've got a line and bury tall chest on the class schedule for this year, and we're going to use this machine to route out a lot of the grooves in the drawer fronts. You still have to fit the string inlay into the pieces, do the miter joints, all of that kind of stuff. We could have the machine drill out the circles for the berries, all of that stuff, simply because it's a 2D thing we can set up. When I did it last time, when I ran the class a couple of years ago, we made drawer fronts that were oversized, and I took them to Felder and we set it up on one of their HNC benchtop CNC machines, and it's routed them all out, and it was awesome. Here we can actually fit the drawer fronts into the drawer openings, bring the design in, because this has 3 arch top drawers across the top. They're curved, and the inlay follows that. So if the drawer front gets a tiny bit small, I can rescale it 1%, 0.5%, whatever, to bring it down to fit the drawer front properly. And I can place it exactly where I want on the drawer front. And then we can route it out. And you don't have to start with something that's oversized and then cut it down. And I can modify it on the fly to fit the space that we had. So if somebody inadvertently made one of the arch top drawers 1/4 of an inch too narrow, I can shrink it. Or if they made their drawers 1/4 of an inch, the drawer opening is 1/4 of an inch small height wise, I can shrink everything in one or both dimensions on the fly on the machine. So it's a really cool thing. Bob wants to know if I've done any lettering. No, not real. I did a little bit. I had made some stuff for my grandkids last Christmas, and I engraved some stuff in there. I just grabbed one of the fonts that it had in there, laid it out, and routed it, and was done. I haven't played a lot with it. I don't do a whole lot of that kind of stuff. Brian says, Shaper sells a spiral O-bit for non-ferrous metals. It works great. That's fine too. That would work. And Norman says it comes with a number of fonts for lettering, and you can set up your own fonts in Illustrator or another program. Yeah, perfect. Right. So you can import fonts. You can do layouts. I did some stuff in SketchUp for this thing, and what I did was I imported it into Fusion 360 and then exported it from there as an SVG file. But you can also bring it into Adobe Illustrator and modify things there too. So what I found though is the interface, when you bring a file in from SketchUp into Adobe Illustrator, it can sometimes go a little wonky. The program that Carol was using was a program called Rhino, which I've played with a little bit, and I might actually dig into it a bunch more because it has more capabilities than SketchUp. It's more like Fusion 360, except that it's not quite as powerful. It doesn't have the production aspects of it, but we don't need to set up tool paths, which is what Fusion 360 can do. It's kind of somewhere in between Fusion 360 and SketchUp, and it's nowhere near the cost of either one of them. So so the more I play with it, at some point I might do a Tuesday tips on CAD programs and show you a little bit about SketchUp and a little bit about Fusion and a little bit about Rhino, and we can do a little comparison there too. So I think, sorry, Fat Fingers, you got the question. Okay, good. Thanks, Jeff. All right, so anyway, that's where I think we are. We've gone almost an hour and 20 minutes now. I'm beat, so I'm going to call it a night. Thank you guys for sticking around. If you're watching this post live on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel. It helps out a lot. Make sure you ring that notification bell because you don't want to miss any of this. Thanks again for coming. Next week, I was going to do something with with my plunge router and the edge guide and stuff like that and show you some of that stuff. But I think I really, a while back, I did a thing on spindle turning, and I told you I would bring in the overhead camera and set that up and do some stuff for that. So I think that's really what I'd like to do with this for next week is I'm going to do a little bit more spindle turning and see if we can't up the game on what I did last time to make it a little bit, make things a little clearer. And I'll show you a few really cool little spindle tricks next week. So thanks for coming. Thanks for sticking around, and I will see you next week.